Have you ever hugged someone so tight, but still felt an invisible distance? That profound loneliness right in the arms of the person you love? I stood on a freezing platform in Denmark, my life packed into one suitcase, finally understanding that what I needed wasn't a better hug from him, but the courage to let go. This journey from the shadows into the light didn't just save me. It forever changed how I learn English, and how I listen to the quietest parts of myself. The freezing station. Let me paint you a picture. Copenhagen Central Station, 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. The air is so cold it feels solid, like you could break it with your hands. I am standing on platform 6, a statue in the dim, yellow glow of the old station lights. My entire life is packed into one suitcase beside me. My train, the last one to Aarhus, is due in 13 minutes. And my entire being is focused on one silent, desperate prayer. Please come. Please stop me from leaving. Every shadow that moved under the arches sent a jolt through my heart. Every distant footstep echoing on the wet concrete sounded like it could be his. This is a special kind of torture, you know? Hoping for a miracle that a part of you already knows won't happen. Your logical brain understands the truth, the relationship is over. But your heart is a stubborn and hopeful thing. It clings to the what-ifs and maybes like a life raft in a stormy sea. I was drowning, not in the Danish winter air, but in my own ocean of waiting. I was waiting for him to choose me, to prove my worth, to close the distance I felt growing between us for months. I thought if he just came, that hug would fix everything. But as the clock ticked down, the only thing holding me was the cold, and the crushing weight of my own realization. I was utterly alone. The first cracks. So where did it truly begin, this feeling of a growing chasm? It wasn't born on that freezing platform. No, the first cracks appeared months earlier, hidden in the quiet, ordinary fabric of our daily life. I first sensed the distance not with my arms, but with a quiet ache in my soul. It was in the subtle transformation of his embraces. They became briefer, less like a sanctuary where I could hide from the world and more like a polite, automatic ritual. A quick squeeze hello, a perfunctory pat on the back goodbye. There's a scientific term I discovered later, during my long hours of listening to psychology podcasts in English, that perfectly describe this emptiness. Affection deprivation. It's a real physiological state. Your skin, your entire nervous system, is wired for connection and literally craves the safety and reassurance of warm, secure touch. Without it, a deep sense of isolation begins to seep into your bones. Even when you're sitting right next to someone, I started to notice these tiny fractures everywhere, like hairline cracks in a beautiful, cherished face. We would sit on our comfortable sofa, the one we had saved for months to buy together, but an invisible wall had been erected. He would be lost in the endless scroll of his phone, the blue glow casting shadows on his face, while I sat silently studying the curve of his cheek, searching for the man I once knew. The silence in our stylish Copenhagen apartment was no longer comfortable. It had become a heavy, loud presence. It was, ironically, the loudest sound I had ever heard. A deafening roar of unspoken words, unmet glances, and dying shared jokes. I tried desperately at times to fill the void with cheerful chatter. How was your day? I'd ask. Maybe we could go to that new cafe this weekend? I'd suggest. But my words seemed to simply hang in the air between us for a moment before falling, lifeless and unanswered, to the floor. That was the core of it. The distance wasn't measured in inches between our bodies on the couch. It was measured in light years of emotional absence. And I was floating utterly untethered in that vast and lonely space. The silent agreement. It's fascinating and perhaps a little tragic how human beings adapt to emotional neglect. We don't always stage dramatic confrontations. More often, we simply retreat into a quiet, internal fortress. This was the silent, unspoken agreement we forged in that beautiful Copenhagen apartment. You remain on your island, I'll remain on mine, and we will pretend the ocean between us doesn't exist. Our home, once a sanctuary filled with the scent of fresh coffee and shared laughter, had transformed. Its minimalist furniture, its carefully arranged candles meant to evoke hygge. It all became a stage set for a play that had long since closed. We were two polite ghosts, expertly performing the motions of a relationship. A faint, hollow smile in the hallway. A mumbled "How was your day?" that neither of us expected a real answer to. The most consistent sound was the hum of the refrigerator or the distant sirens of the city, a constant reminder of a world moving on without us, while we were frozen in this beautiful silent stalemate. The silence was a physical weight, and I desperately needed something to fill it. My escape, my unexpected lifeline, became the English language. While he was lost in the flickering glow of Danish television or the infinite, mindless scroll of social media, I would create my own universe. I would put on my headphones and the world would shift. The crushing quiet was replaced by the voices of podcast hosts, compassionate storytellers, insightful psychologists, passionate historians. They spoke in clear, deliberate, and beautifully slow English. Their voices became my companions, my secret teachers, my confidants. They were speaking to me, engaging my mind with fascinating concepts and asking profound questions that actually demanded a mental response. At a time when my own heart felt utterly disconnected and disengaged. This wasn't passive consumption. It was an active, vibrant conversation. I found myself pausing the audio to repeat phrases aloud, feeling the shape of unfamiliar words in my mouth, the rhythm of a well-constructed sentence. I was building a bridge out of that silent apartment, plank by linguistic plank, using a language that wasn't my native tongue. My brain, starved for meaningful connection and intellectual stimulation, latched onto this new input with a voracious appetite. It was a cognitive and emotional survival mechanism. I was learning more than just vocabulary and pronunciation. I was rediscovering my own curiosity. I was learning how to learn again, how to feel wonder, and most importantly, how to construct an identity for myself that existed independently of the failing relationship. In learning to listen to these English voices, I was quietly, slowly learning how to listen to myself again. It was the first fragile but crucial step toward my own liberation. The Danish Rain. There is a unique quality to the rain in Copenhagen. It's rarely a violent, cathartic storm. Instead, it's a persistent, gentle drizzle. A soft gray blanket that descends for days, seeping not just into your coat, but into your very bones. It became the perfect metaphor for my emotional state. The cold wasn't a sharp shock, it was a slow creeping numbness. One particularly bleak afternoon, the silence in our apartment became unbearable. It was a physical pressure on my eardrums. Without a word, I put on my jacket and just started walking. I had no destination. I walked past the vibrant Nyhavn Canal, its colorful houses muted under the gloomy sky. I walked through narrow cobblestone streets, the sound of my footsteps swallowed by the damp air. The rain soaked through my hair and trickled down my neck, but I barely felt it. The external chill was nothing compared to the frozen stillness that had taken root inside me. I was a spectator to my own life, watching the world through a wet, blurred window that I found myself on a quiet bench overlooking a lesser-known canal, the water a dark, choppy gray. And there, with the rain masking my tears, I finally broke. I let out all the unsaid words, the unfulfilled hopes, the crushing disappointment. I cried for the man who was no longer there, for the future we had planned, and for the lonely woman I had become. It was messy and raw and real. And in the midst of that emotional storm, a profound clarity emerged. I had been waiting for him to bring the sunshine back into my life, waiting for him to say the right words, to offer the perfect hug that would magically melt the ice around my heart. I had handed him the sole responsibility for my own happiness, my own warmth, my own emotional weather. I was a passive character in my own story, a queen waiting for someone else to light a fire in her own palace. And as I sat there, shivering and utterly spent, I realized his hands were empty. He had no matches to give me. He couldn't, because the fire I so desperately needed had to be sparked from within. The rain continued to fall, but for the first time I wasn't just getting wet. I was being cleansed. I was washing away the illusion that my well-being depended on someone else. It was a terrifying and liberating realization all at once. The journey back to myself was no longer about crossing the distance to him. It was about turning inward and building a home there. The bench by the canal. I must have been a strange sight, sitting alone on that bench, soaked to the bone and crying in the rain. Just when I thought I couldn't feel any more alone, an elderly Danish man approached. He wore a simple wool coat and carried a small folded umbrella. He didn't say a word at first, simply nodding to me as he sat on the far end of the bench. We sat in shared silence for what felt like a long time, just watching the raindrops disturb the surface of the canal. The simplicity of his presence was oddly comforting. It wasn't an intrusion, but a quiet acknowledgement of shared space. Then he spoke. His voice was calm, and he chose his English words slowly and carefully, as if selecting each one for its weight and meaning. "The weather outside," he said, gesturing vaguely towards the gray sky, "it is not so important." I looked at him, my tear-streaked face surely showing my confusion. What did he mean? The weather felt like everything. He then gently tapped his chest over his heart with 2 fingers. "The weather in here," he continued, his eyes kind and knowing, "that is the job." And with a small, almost imperceptible smile, he stood up, opened his umbrella, and walked away, leaving me alone with the echo of his words. That brief 5-second interaction shattered my entire worldview. He had perfectly articulated the core of hygge, a concept I had completely misunderstood. I, like many foreigners, thought it was all about external comforts, candles, warm socks, a cozy blanket. But he was pointing to its true, profound essence. It's the conscious, active cultivation of inner warmth and a sense of safety and contentment for yourself, regardless of the storms raging outside. My storm was a failing relationship, a deep loneliness. I had been so fixated on the distance in his hug, so desperate for him to provide the warmth, that I had forgotten I possessed the ability to generate my own. I had arms to wrap around myself. I had a voice to comfort myself. I had the power to light my own internal candle. The man wasn't just talking about the rain. He was talking about the coldness in my own heart that I was waiting for someone else to thaw. His words became a mantra that I replayed in my head. The weather in here. That is the job. My job. Not his, not anyone else's. It was the most empowering and daunting realization. The responsibility for my emotional climate was mine alone. And with that responsibility came a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, agency. I could learn to be my own source of hygge. Unlearning love. Armed with that simple, profound wisdom from the stranger, I embarked on the most important project of my life myself. I made a conscious decision to stop trying to fill his silence and start filling my own world with meaning, sound, and connection. I had to actively unlearn the toxic belief that love was only something you passively received from another person. It was a verb and energy I could generate. So I did something that terrified me. I signed up for a pottery class at a local community center where the instruction was in English. The first day my hands were trembling, and not just from the cold clay. I had to use my broken, hesitant English to ask for tools, to compliment my international classmates' creations, and to laugh at my own lopsided, collapsing bowls. "Can I have more slip, please?" I would ask, my pronunciation clumsy. "Your vase is beautiful," I'd stammer to the woman from Spain. And something magical began to happen. As I focused all my attention on centering the clay on the wheel, a task requiring immense patience and presence, the noisy, anxious thoughts about my relationship began to quiet down. My mind, fully engaged in the sensory experience of creation, had no room for its old patterns of worry. This was where my passive listening to English podcasts transformed into active, lived language. I wasn't just hearing words. I was using them as tools to build a new social reality. The classroom became a safe laboratory where I could practice being a new, more confident version of myself, all in the safe container of a foreign language. My English improved exponentially not because I was memorizing grammar rules from a textbook, but because I was using it as a lifeline to connect, to create, to belong to a community that had nothing to do with my past. Each successfully formed pot, each shared laugh over a mistake, was a brick in the foundation of my new identity. I was learning that love was also about loving the process of becoming, about showing up for yourself with the same patience I showed to the clay on the wheel. The voices from my headphones were no longer just a distraction. They had been my training wheels. Now I was riding on my own, using the language not to escape my life, but to build a richer, more resilient one. The warmth I had been seeking from him, I was now creating for myself in a sunlit studio, surrounded by the messy, beautiful evidence of my own capacity to shape something from nothing. The last hug. And so my journey led me back to where it had to end, the station. As the loudspeaker announced the final boarding call for my train to Aarhus, a strange calm settled over me. The frantic hope that had defined my wait just minutes before had evaporated, replaced by a quiet, solid certainty. I picked up my suitcase, my hand steady, and turned towards the train doors. It was in that exact moment I saw him. He was running, his breath forming frantic clouds in the cold air, his face a canvas of panic and regret. He skidded to a halt in front of me, his words tumbling out in a rushed, desperate plea. "Don't go. Please. We can fix this." And then he hugged me. It was a tight, almost crushing embrace, the kind I had fantasized about for months. He held me as if he could physically stop my departure, as if his arms could rebuild everything that had crumbled between us. I let him hold me, and in that moment I performed the final, most important act of listening of my life. I listened not to his words but to my own body, to my own soul. And the truth was deafening. The distance was still there. It wasn't in the space between our bodies. It was in the profound, unbridgeable chasm between our souls, our needs, our paths. This hug wasn't a reconnection. It was a final, desperate goodbye. It was the echo of what once was, not the promise of what could be. I felt his heart hammering against my chest, a frantic rhythm of loss. But my own heart beat a slow, steady, and resolute rhythm of release. The warmth of his body could not penetrate the peaceful, self-sufficient warmth I had cultivated within myself. I had spent so long trying to cross the distance to him, but now I understood that the only journey that mattered was the one leading me back to myself. I gently pulled away from his embrace. My eyes were dry. "I have to go," I said, my voice clear and firm, surprising even me. I saw the shock and devastation in his eyes, but for the first time, I did not let his pain override my own truth. I picked up my suitcase, stepped onto the train, and did not look back. As the train began to move, pulling me away from the platform, from him, from my old life, I didn't cry. I looked out the window at the receding lights of the city, and I felt it. Not sadness, but a profound, expansive sense of peace. I was no longer waiting. I was moving. I was finally, blessedly moving forward. My own embrace. Now, when I sit here in my new apartment in Aarhus, the meaning of that distance has completely transformed. It is no longer a void to be filled by someone else, but the very space I needed to find myself. When I listen to English now, I don't just hear words and sentences. I hear the subtle courage in a slow, deliberate pause. I feel the resilience in a carefully chosen word. I understand that learning a language slowly and mindfully is not a weakness. It is a profound act of self-respect. It's about being fully present with each sound, each meaning, allowing the language to seep into you and become a part of your own story. Just like my experiences in Copenhagen have become a part of me. This journey taught me that true listening, whether to a language or to your own heart, requires creating a quiet, brave space within yourself. A space where you can hear your own truth above the noise of the world's expectations. The distance in his hug taught me the most vital lesson I will ever learn. You cannot, and must not, seek in others what is fundamentally missing within yourself. No person, no relationship, can be the sole source of your warmth, your validation, or your happiness. That is an impossible weight to place on another human being, and a sure path to your own disillusionment. The genuine, lasting warmth, the real deep-down hygge, is not found in a candlelit room or another person's arms. It is forged in the quiet moments when you choose to embrace your own journey, to forgive your own stumbles, and to celebrate your own small victories. It comes from learning to be your own most compassionate friend, your own safest harbor. So I will ask you the question that my entire story has been leading to, the one I had to answer for myself. When did you last feel truly, completely, and securely held? If the answer doesn't immediately point back to you, then perhaps it's time. Time to realize that the strongest, most secure, and most loving embrace you will ever know, the one that will never let you down, the one that holds all your broken pieces with infinite patience, is and always will be your own. That's all for today. I will make more similar videos in the future. Please subscribe to watch.